Welcome back. I think lunch was too delicious. People have felt sleepy and left. Nevertheless, post-lunch session are always like that. Uh, but I'm sure that the kind of panel we have, they will definitely wake you up. So this session is about building resilient supply chain, and we have Commodore Abhay Kumar Singh. He will be chairing the session. And then we have four eminent speakers, starting with Dr. Kaur, Dr. Palit, Professor Khalid, and Dr. Ray. So I won't take any further time, sir. I would hand over to Commodore Abhay Kumar Singh to take us through this session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, RIS, for inviting me to chair this discussion on this very important subject. Because in recent time, this supply chain resilience has become rather frequently used in whether it is ministerial statement, think tank reports, multilateral joint statements. Supply chain resilience is one phrase which you find constantly figuring. And that lies the risk, because if it is used too frequently, it's becoming, it could become a rhetorical catch-all, which is in any way just becoming. And it is invoked to justify everything from industrial policy subsidies to geopolitical decoupling. Particularly in India-ASEAN context, it means different things to different actors. In India, generally we understand this by reducing import dependency in a single source, and particularly would be China. For Vietnam and Malaysia, it would mean attracting diversified FDI while preserving existing Chinese linkage. For Singapore, for example, it may mean maintaining hub status regardless of who is producing. And I hope our discussion here provides some definitional baseline in the context of where we live in India-ASEAN trade relationship. On the topic as such, I have three brief observations. First, we are meeting at a genuinely consequential juncture, or rather on the strategic moment. Both whether US tariff escalation or Iran conflict has brought this supply chain resilience on the forefront. And some argue that these external shocks to the regional trade architecture is of a kind which has not been seen since 2008 financial crisis. ASEAN economy that has positioned themselves as a primary beneficiary of China plus one diversification now find themselves directly in line of US trade pressure. We have also been target of that. Paradoxically, this shared exposure creates structural incentive for India and ASEAN to deepen intra-regional supply chain integration that is less dependent on access to any external market. Whether that incentive will translate into institutional action is precisely the question we need to discuss in this session. And I should add that in this is relevant in the presence of perception that supply chain disruptions are no longer merely an economic inconvenience. They are increasingly becoming strategic vulnerability. Second, specifically on the India-ASEAN supply chain relationship. The relationship has considerable latent complementarity that remain underutilized and unfulfilled. India's GVC integration with ASEAN has been growing, but from a low base and concentrated in a narrow range of sectors. The ASEAN-India Free Trade Agreement, which is now under review, has not delivered the deep production network integration to its architects which have been researched. Indian firms have been slow to embed themselves in ASEAN supply chain. ASEAN investment in India, while growing, remains selective. The goal of India-ASEAN supply chain cooperation is diversification and not substitution, and the supply architecture needs to reflect that distinction. And concept note has identified specific themes, and these are three emerging frontiers: digital logistics and supply chain transparency, green shipping and sustainable maritime infrastructure, and collaborative mechanism linking government, industry, and regional institutions. In my view, these are not parallel tracks but deeply interconnected ones. Digitalization without investment in physical infrastructure is a dashboard without engine. The green transition without financing mechanism in a aspiration without a balance sheet. And the intergovernment framework without private sector buy-in are, as we have already repeatedly seen in this region, a framework that looked impressive in communique but remain rather unimplemented or unimplementable in practice. So our panel is exactly has the mix of perspective needed to address this dimension. I would be particularly interested in hearing perspective from Singapore, from Dr. Palib, or Malaysia, Professor Khalid, about India's role in ASEAN supply chain and how it will figure. Because ultimately India's role in ASEAN supply chain will not be determined by our ambition in Delhi, but whether ASEAN partners finds reliable, competitive, and institutionally compatible. And with these few words, let me invite our first speaker, Dr. Arshinder Kaur from IIT Madras. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Very delighted to be here. Thank you, RIS, for inviting me. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Yes. So, can we start with my perspectives?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. And very sorry could not be there in person. But it would be really good to interact with you all here. Again, thanks to RIS for inviting me for this very important topic today. I have been working in IIT Madras for past 18 years. I work in operations and supply chain. Recently, I ventured into logistics management. I'm co-heading a center here, which is called FedEx Smart Center. So it's funded by FedEx. So where we are looking at, many air cargo logistics related issues. But as my research area and, expertise is in supply chain management, and as an academician, I would bring, some theoretical and academic concepts on resilience and the new form of resilience called viability. To set the tone, I know we have a very esteemed speakers for this session, which would throw some light on the ground realities and the practicalities of Asia and India collaboration. But my view would be more on how we should view resilience, how we should adopt the new version of resilience, which is viability. And I work on supply chain optimization. I'm also advisor to one startup which is in this domain of ocean logistics. Whatever I have experienced, whatever I have read, I would like to share today with the audience. So we all are now, thanks to, I should not say thanks to COVID, but at least we all become aware of the word supply chain because of the COVID, which is a major disruption called Black Swan event, which has happened in the whole world, which has major disruption in this whole world, which lasted for many years, very long disruption. So, supply chain risk is not new to most of us. It's not only COVID. The risk has been there, for ages. It could be financial risk. It could be any natural disaster. The disruptions have been, the supply chain risks have been there. So, but those kind of disasters are not that prolonged. So, because COVID was such a prolonged disaster, that's why, like, even the people who are not working in supply chain, they become aware of what is a supply chain. So now, since we all are aware of risk, like, and resilience, we all know about resilience, which is about creating the ability of supply chain to continue operating in face of risk event or disruption. So first motive of my talk would be uh, so when we talk about resilience, this definition is very good, but it's a time, like, to get away from concentrating on what is the risky event, what are the disruption, which are causing the whole disastrous thing, either to supply chain entities, or impacting various sector and humans. uh, the concept of resilience needs to be changed now from identifying types of risk to what are the capabilities or capacities we lose because of such risky event. For example, right now, we have war situation. We have, like, currently, like, all geopolitical risks are, like, hovering around us. And even we have survived, even the current war situation with India too. So given this risky situation, if we would start enumerating, like, risk, this is due to war, this is due to natural disaster, the focus, rather than focusing on what is the type of risk, what is the cause of risk, if we would start focusing on the capabilities and the capacities which are lost due to any type of risk. For example, the current thing, we are not able to get, LPG. Our logistics is, like, struggling. We are not able to manufacture goods because, there is a risk of, like, getting semiconductors, or like vice versa. The reason, the cause could be anything, but how we are losing on our capacities and capabilities. No matter what is the reason, the resilience concept has to be evolved to what is our lost capabilities. It can be the loss of capability of acquiring material, it can be like shipping and transportation, uh, losing capability on communicating, losing capability of manufacturing our goods, losing capability on human resources, financial flows, or our distribution to the customers. This can be the capacity loss. Now, I would say that, no matter what is risk, the impact can be only on this four five. So when we would start concentrating on, what is the loss, what is the impact we are facing, I think that concept of resilience is the best way, to tackle, any risky situation, any loss situation which is there. And now, we are moving ahead. This is an academic concept, but I'm sure, this is getting good drive in practicality also. We are now moving from resiliency to viability. This is the most recent and relevant concept, in the domain of risk management or resilience management. So I think we should move now from resilience to viability, which is more of an adaptation based. So when I say viability, what does this mean? Like, if any risky situation comes, how we can maintain ourselves, survive in this changing, disruptive movement through redesign of structure, replanning, restructuring, with the long term impact. So far we have been focusing on resilience as like bouncing back. We try, to get to our original performance, which was there before any risky event has occurred. I think now, we have moved from that resilience aspect to viability, where, we have to maintain, how we keep surviving, during this such kind of disruptive events, right? by restructuring, replanning, reconfiguration with a long-term impact. Means can we not only bounce back, but bounce back with improved profitability, right? If we were at point A, how we can move A plus delta, in the wake of such kind of situation, right? Disastrous situation. That also gives, us the survivability, that ability to continue to exist, right? So how basically viability says how we can adapt, and uh, so adaptation, require many efforts. Okay, so we already know that when we talk about maritime resilience, we are struggling with our infrastructure, right, which needs to be modernization, needs to be expanded. Our multimodal linkage is very weak right now. So when we say supply chain network diversification, we should focus on what are the alternate routes, backup suppliers, alternate suppliers. Can we go for multiple sourcing, right? Digital interventions are very important so that we can have smart reports, digital trade platforms, real time tracking, visibility. Regulatory and security has to be harmonized, customs, trade facilitation agreements, right? Port governance reforms, and operational efficiency. The most important thing: the route optimization, supplier rationalization, turnaround time, and sustainable operations. So I actually come more from the operational efficiency point of view and supply chain network optimization point of view. But when we talk about supply chain viability, like where we should head, you know, uh, we can we can actually, or we should focus on how we can redesign our supply chain, how we diversify, how we can use buffering and redundancy strategies, how we can innovate. When I say redesign supply chain, do we have network redesign and route flexibility, right? So how can we avoid dependence on choke points? This is only possible if we have either the knowledge and information about all the possible links, networks, right? How we can reduce the systemic risk of route blockage. That needs a lot of preparation. Can we diversify, rather than depending on single mega hub like Singapore? Can we integrate the ports? I think this ASEAN India collaboration would be a very useful thing, to identify hubs. But now, what is the right hub? How we can integrate to the smaller hubs, so that we can mitigate some of the risky situation. How we can use the buffer and redundancy. Again, this will go back to how we can redesign the supply chain so that we can have a backup and excess capacities across the ports. Innovation is very important. I have, in IIT Madras, we used to have a e-summit, entrepreneurship summit, where many startups would come. So I have seen, one very enthusiastic team of startups, they are making some kind of high speed chips. I won't understand the technology part of those kind of ship, but there are coming up with high speed ships which can actually travel long distance, but relatively short sea shipping combinations, where one can think of transporting high margin products, low volume. So this such kind of innovation can be looked at, where you have lower exposure to long haul disruptions. So innovation is also key, keep innovating so that at the time of disruption, such innovative ideas can be explored. We definitely need smart and adaptive ports. I'm advising one startup, which is on work on, request for quotations, RFQs management, and procurement management, and the
Could
main
summer,
activities
sorry
tracking.
for interrupting. I was just thinking if you could summarize in next about minutes or so.
Sure, sure, I would. So with the experience with those startup, it was really shocking to see that we have not done much on the digital aspect of any of the aspects of related to maritime, which we have said. It's few of the companies are still working on tracking and traceability, but still I think a lot of work has to be done, because just small example, when it comes to supply management or supplier management, so all the companies or all the stakeholders, they are working on their own templates and formats, like where digital intervention with blockchain technologies can be really useful. Those are the some of the things which would help in achieving supply chain viability. So this is and the area where we are working on are this digital platform is not mere converting whatever we have in the digital platform in the digital formats, but given intelligent and decision support system, so that one can work in the dynamics and uncertainty situation of ports, vessel lanes. Like, can we work on dynamic situation to optimize, to with a clear traceability, with a clear tracking, of the products. So integrating land sea corridors are lacking. So all these initiatives, can be really worked out on supply chain viability. Have the concept of changing resilience to supply chain viability by reconfiguring, redesigning. So I would conclude with one very good example here. We all know that after COVID, production and manufacturing, they face a huge issue of chip or electronics parts supply. So in that case, they really quickly reconfigured, their supply chain by they changed their production, by just removing, the non-vital parts which required this chips. So that but that cannot come without innovation, that cannot come if they were able to design their product in a modular fashion, so that they can retrofit, that part, that product later on, right? So this is how one can think of such viable situation to mitigate risk and achieve resilience. So I would say that digital intervention, capacity expansion, innovation, use of latest technology to cater to cybersecurity, all these aspects have to be built in the maritime development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have given us a very concrete suggestion of thinking about supply chain resilience and turning vulnerability into viability. These useful suggestions, I think, will be reflected even by other panelists as well. So now with this, I invite Dr. Amitendu Palit, and sir, may I request you to be about just for 10 minutes, and so others as well.
Thank you so much, Komodo Singh. I definitely will give that 10-minute slot at the back of my mind. And let me begin by thanking the RIS, Professor Sachin Sharma. I'm sort of fortuitously here in Delhi today, so it's a great pleasure to be here in person. I'll make some very specific points, and these points are in a wider context, and I'll bring these elements of this context together. First is the subject of supply chain resilience. The second is the India-ASEAN cooperation, and third is maritime. So I'll bring these three elements together into a suggestion box, if I could describe it this way. I want to start with two assumptions. The first is, Komodo Singh, I think you were absolutely right when you mentioned in your opening remarks about supply chains and supply chain resilience becoming a buzzword over the last 4 to 5 years. Indeed, it has. But along with that buzzing has come a lot of partial understanding about the subject. There's often, a certain degree of asymmetry in the way this is understood. But I think Professor Kaur gave us a fairly nice technical understanding of what supply chain resilience is all about. And I'll just bring this down into 2 points. Supply chain resilience would essentially, from an industry or even a country perspective, imply A, the ability to prevent supply chains from disrupting, number one, but that is not foolproof. Supply chains will disrupt because there are exogenous events which are impossible to capture and predict. But if they disrupt, then how quickly can they return to normalcy? I think that decides the agility and the resilience of supply chains. If that is the way forward, and if that is what we are looking at in the context of India and ASEAN, then I think there's another point that we need to keep in mind. Supply chains, and whatever supply chains India and ASEAN are engaged in, are not confined to India and ASEAN alone. They extend well beyond India and ASEAN, bring in a larger group of countries, if not most of the rest of the world into them. So it's not just a question of India and ASEAN cooperating. It's a question of India and ASEAN shifting their cooperation into a greater cooperation, because we are talking about territories, we are talking about regional territories, and we are talking about extra territories. And you being from the industry, you will appreciate that when we look at rules, especially on shippings, there are territorial rules and territorial waters. But when cargoes move, they cross territories and they become extraterritorial, and that extraterritorial space is very large for India and ASEAN, because we are looking at east-west movement of goods. Any standard shipping line, whether it be the Maersk or the COSCO, is crossing large swathes of water and getting into extraterritorial space. There is, in fact, an effort to actually build this understanding. There was an effort, I should say, into a framework, a rules-based framework, which was known as the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the IPEF. The IPEF had, among the many things that it discussed, an agreement on supply chain resilience and cooperation. The reason why I raised the IPEF is because the IPEF comprises 14 countries. Out of these 14 countries, India is one, and there are 7 ASEAN states which are a party to IPEF, except Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. And of course, now we have Timor, which has come into ASEAN, which wasn't there when IPEF was constructed. There are 7 ASEAN countries which are a part of IPEF, and they are actually equivalent rule takers in the IPEF space. And very specifically, there are suggestions which have not just been provided, they are also being currently implemented on ground between the parties. We haven't heard much about the IPEF over the last 1.5 years, simply because tariffs have completely consumed all attention, and the United States has not spoken of IPEF. But very strangely, United States hasn't walked out of the IPEF as well. It's continued to remain engaged or passively engaged, in whatever way we describe it. Now, in that context and the larger framework that we have, and in keeping the India-ASEAN maritime and the resilience issue in mind, I want to make 5 specific suggestions. One, it's very important to identify the risk that cargoes run, and what is the risk for international cargo security. When shipping lines run, a great amount of risk for supply chains arise from the risk that the cargoes face, and by what extent those risks can materialize. And what risks are we talking about? Normal business as usual situation, it could be piracy, it could be bad weather, it could be loss of cargo on the sea. But there's a bigger risk which now raises its head, and this is especially after the series of conflicts that we have seen from 2022, beginning from Russia-Ukraine, then Israel-Gaza, and finally the Iran war. This is conflict and wartime situation affecting the cargo on the water, and what happens as a result of that. Now, it's important to understand and analyze this risk, especially between India and Southeast Asia and countries which are engaged in collective shipping. Because cargo across India and ASEAN is not point to point. It's moving across a network of ports. It's often coming from China, it's often coming from Japan, it's often coming from even down further in South Pacific, crossing East China Sea, moving into South China Sea into the Strait of Malacca, then moving forward into the Bay of Bengal, or maybe into the Indian Ocean, and then moving westward into the Persian Gulf, and then perhaps, depending upon the situation and the exigency, either running around the Cape of Good Hope or a variety of routes. Across various points of this route, there are risks to the cargo. What is the security of passage available to that cargo? I think that is a question which is very important to take up, and this is something on which India and ASEAN have had an understanding insofar as understanding the problem is concerned. But the next step has to be with respect to crafting of rules. And this is not just government rules. There's a multitude of stakeholders which has to come into the story. Connected to this risk identification is my second point. How would these risks be managed? Well, the answer is very simple. There has to be insurance. And we are talking about financial insurance in this regard. How is cargo insured? Well, the first option could be, it could be the liability of the carrier. And they issue bill of lading, on which there is a limited liability mentioned. Then there is expanded liability, but the carrier liability, at least as far as the commercial carrier liability, is only limited up to a certain threshold. What we have seen first with respect to the Suez Canal Red Sea situation, and then now subsequently with the Iran war, is that shippers and containers are refusing to take liability for any kind of disruption to cargo that arises out of an incident which can be described as a war-like or a conflict-driven product. Let's say a drone attack, a missile attack that leads to a breakage in the ship. The cargo goes down. Now, international shipping principles usually say that when cargo gets lost on sea, in water, there's an equal responsibility sharing. However, this is a completely different situation. Now, in this kind of a situation, given the fact that that cargo is an essential component of a variety of supply chains, it could be electronics, it could be food, it could be energy, it could be a number of other factors. If that cargo is not insured, and if insurance companies are not being provided reinsurance for that cargo, how would shipping proceed? I mean, shipping doesn't have to actually wait for a problem to happen. The very anticipation and worry about the problem will cause the disruption. Right? And that will immediately cause to delays. I mean, I know this for sure because we have seen this happening in the most efficient of ports, that's in Singapore. We have seen this happening in Colombo, in transshipment. When the Red Sea crisis itself led to a massive delay of containers and offloading, that lag has now been perpetuated. Now, this is where probably India and ASEAN need to look at this understanding in the context of what was not there 5 years ago, but what is there now. The global circumstances have completely changed. So I think that's a critical issue. When we finally come to the understanding of risks, assessments, insurance, there's one factor that becomes critical, and that is information sharing and knowledge about each other's capacities and systems. It's not just enough to say that we live in a digital world. We live in a world which is practically digitized. Now, when that happens, there's a further understanding that comes in. Digitization varies across enterprises, and especially when we are talking about logistics enterprises, the degree of digitization varies. There's a great amount of digitization that has happened in individual ports with respect to the trade facilitation and clearance levels. But whether that has also happened with enterprises is a different question. And now this is where a critical problem comes in. It's not enough for enterprises just to get digitized. They have to digitize in alignment with the rules of digital standards that have come in various countries. When it comes to India, India must take note of the fact that ASEAN is getting digitized as a community. ASEAN is getting integrated into the Digital Economy Framework Agreement, which is work in progress, which will produce the ASEAN digital community, in about 5 to 6 years' time, if not before. And the Digital Economy Framework Agreement is expected to be a binding agreement. If it is a binding agreement, that means that there are implications of enterprises not complying with the rules of the digital framework. So there cannot be flexibilities with respect to that. So when Indian operators are engaging with ASEAN operators through digital standards, whether it be in data, whether it be in cybersecurity, or whether it be even in simple basic things like digital signatures and digital identities, and especially between bill of lading, invoices, and so on and so forth, there has to be a connection between this space. Unfortunately, that has not happened, and there's a lot of ground to be crossed. My fourth and fifth points. Well, we all talk about supply chain resilience and the problems that are arising to them from various chokes. Shipping routes are getting chokes. There are a number of shipping routes in the world which are characterized as choke points because they're very narrow. You know, the width across them, the vital shipping routes. I mean, this is not just Hormuz. It's also true of the Suez Canal. It's also true of the Strait of Malacca. And there are many other shipping routes, I mean, including something like the Panama Canal, which is also not particularly wide and robust. Assuming these get disrupted. Today the Hormuz is disrupted. The Red Sea Suez Canal route was also disrupted previously. Suez normally, under normal situations in COVID, got disrupted because the Evergreen container turned the other side. What is the alternative? How do goods move? Because there are goods which cannot move by air. Bulk, wet cargo, impossible to ship by air. You know, customized cargo can. What are the alternatives? And this is something which India and ASEAN needs to devote their thoughts on. If that trade gets disrupted due to choke point congestion, is there an alternative? Are there an alternatives through which that trade can keep moving? The lines can keep moving. And who will give security of passage through the alternative routes? You can't have the US Navy escorting you everywhere in the world, right? So how would that happen? What are the alternatives, and can those be worked out? The final point. We have looked at resilience from the point of view of disruption and blocking it. But there's another way of looking at resilience, or creating resilience, that is to create chains afresh, built on the premise of they being resilient. And this is where the idea of green shipping becomes very effective. And this is where a country like Singapore has been proficient, because Singapore port and the Rotterdam port have a green shipping agreement between them. Singapore's a bunkering port as well for storing the clean fuel, including green hydrogen and ammonia. When we look at green shipping routes, again, this was an idea which was tested out between India, Australia, Singapore, and a variety of other members in the IPEF, as to how green shipping can actually build up an energy supply chain which is based on renewables and which reduces reliance on conventional energy movement through other parts and other supply chains which are regularly choked. You know, because if you are looking at, let's say, for example, like the Strait of Hormuz, the bulk of cargo, energy cargo moving through Hormuz is actually not clean energy. Right? So if the direction of that flow can be changed according to the character of the cargo, there's a possibility that you lay your hands upon an alternative supply chain which by itself, by its very character, can generate resilience. It doesn't have to be resilience purchased. It is resilience grown organically. I think I'll not venture beyond this point in time, except for sharing one final thought, that I think the whole idea of supply chain resilience for the latest period of conversation that it has been, has focused on two things. One is geopolitics, how that is leading to supply chain disruptions, and it has also led to a phenomenal rethinking and and panic and paranoia around supply chains and taking of strategic decisions, much less attention has been paid to one basic point. Supply chain resilience calls for integration of cross-territorial rules. And the cross-territorial rules are completely different. The rule of the sea, the rule of the ships, and a variety of other rules which are now necessarily to be brought into conversation. And India and ASEAN are well placed to take this conversation forward because they have been engaged in it to a certain extent, but a lot remains to be done way forward. I hope I was within my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Palid. Thank you very much. And you actually raised some very important point. One that being supply chain resilience between India and ASEAN is not a bilateral issue between the country and a region. It is rather part of a very broader conversation. And more importantly, that if the trade flow at sea remains to be uninterrupted and uninterruptible, which is the core of the supply chain resilience, in that case we need a robust rule-based order backed by collaborative ability to ensure good order at sea. We are in a geopolitical situation where these are at this stage aspirational. We can talk about how to ensure at least that bring about resilience in the bilateral trade flow. And if we can do that, probably this can be an example for broader global trade flow as well. So thank you very much. And let me invite Professor Khalid for sharing his perspective on how to building the resilient supply chain. So, Professor Khalid, yes, good afternoon. Welcome.
Namaste, namaskar, everyone. Good afternoon from Malaysia. Greetings.
So,
Can everyone hear me clearly?
Yeah, thank you very much for joining, and you have the floor for about 10 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Although I prepared about 100 slides, so I'll make use of the time given to me. No, just kidding. That just shows my level of enthusiasm discussing about this topic, which is very near and dear to me, which is resilience in the supply chain. And as you know, ASEAN and India, we are close trading partners. We have engaged in many strategic engagements. Trade is growing in terms of volume and value. I think in 2025, we exchanged close to about 105 billion US dollars worth of goods. And the trend is going upwards, a strong upward trajectory. Malaysia itself trades about 20 billion US dollars with India. Namely, we export palm oil, integrated circuits, and we import a lot of petroleum products, agricultural products, not to mention Bollywood movies from you guys. So this is a subject which is, of course, very pertinent and very important, especially amid the disruption which is caused by the conflict in the Gulf. And there are even concerns and worrying anxiety that it could conflagrate and even expand and extend to our neck of woods. There have been, concerns about the possibility of Straits of Malacca, which was spoken before by previous speakers in the previous session, that it could escalate to a point where even Straits of Malacca is blockaded, and that can mean they could result in a disastrous consequence to trade and also regional security in this part of the world. Anyway, I prepared some slides. If I could request for the slides to be shown. Just to quickly share with you my thoughts on how to make supply chains, not particularly ASEAN-Indian trade supply chain, but supply chains in general, to make it more resilient in tandem with the topic assigned to me. May I get the slides going, please? Captain Sarabjit? There you go. I think I'm gonna have to refer to my own slides. Okay, there you go. So as I mentioned, The topic of resilience is very important. It is almost imperative at the moment. It used to be at the periphery of discussion on supply chain management, but now it has emerged as a strategic point to a point where chief strategic officers almost often nowadays engage supply chain managers and those in charge of procurement, logistics into the management C-suite circle. Which highlights and underscores the growing importance of supply chains. So amid fluctuating dynamics in geopolitics, in trade, in consumption, in economy, technology, finance, ESG, and so many others, the need for robust, resilient, durable supply chain has become, as I mentioned, a matter of almost life and death to businesses. Next, please. I mentioned about the dynamics, which is really characterized by what is known in a strategic circle as VUCA. No, it's not a planet which has been discovered by the Star Wars Enterprise crew. VUCA literally stands for vulnerability, uncertainties, complexity, and also ambiguity. And these are the characteristics and features which are reshaping, continue to shape the logistics, trade, economic landscape. And of course, they cover a whole gamut of modern aspects, including financing technology, governance, environmental protection, and many other human capital and many other aspects. But suffice to say that every corner, every nook and cranny that we turn, we come across elements of VUCA, which challenge us to think beyond what we already know, sometimes to even exercise a bit of creative destruction and employ new ways to confront the gamut of complexity which we face daily in moving goods across supply chains. What more across the oceans, across borders, with all the attendant complexity when it comes to differing customs procedures in terms of different jurisdictions, legal and standards, and so on. So VUCA is here to stay. It's not going to get any less complex, even with the advent of technology, with predictive analysis. We can see that a big curveball event like the conflict in the Gulf can just happen just like that, and showing no sign of resolution, despite the good intention of some parties, and also the expression of concern of this situation escalating and becoming worse. Next, please. Okay, there are several mega trends in logistics and supply chain which I'd like to quickly cover that demand practitioners, players in the maritime sector, air freight, road transport, multimodal transport, freight forwarders, third-party logistics, fourth-party logistics, and even policymakers and the academia. Everyone who's involved along the supply chain have to be very much aware and keep abreast of all these mega trends. And I can only have enough time to squeeze about 10 of them. So let's go through them one by one. Next. So trend number one is changing production, consumption, sourcing of raw materials, and also the way things are at the moment. So now, we with the advent of globalization, liberalization, there's new trends in terms of how things are made. It's no longer something that says made in USA. It's not necessarily made in USA, but outsourced to places where the factors of production are lower, land, labor, and even in terms of more lenient regulatory aspect and so on. So that has changed the composition of moving goods across supply chains and also across markets and also across the globe. So that is something which will continue to change and to morph and to always move not in a linear or a fashion, but sometimes it can happen to a point where people can be taken by surprise. Look at the tariff war, for example. It has led to protectionist policies that has resulted in countries bringing production of some of their goods closer to shore, and a phenomenon which is known in logistics circle as nearshoring. Then there's also friendshoring, which they keep on coming with all these new terminologies. Friendshoring means sourcing the production of maybe subcomponents like manufacturing, packaging, repackaging to countries which are friendly to your country, and it really looks like this is going to change with emergence of new kinds of concept, which probably would be an improvement of existing concepts, but also maybe a new concept altogether. Just when we thought we have already known enough about things like zero inventory, just in time, lean and mean production, there is always new things, especially in the context of e-commerce, which requires companies to not only deliver as fast as possible. I mean, you can see the way companies like, for example, Amazon has got Amazon Prime. It's almost like promising delivery day today, arrived yesterday. So we're talking about that level of warp speed. Patience is no longer a virtue. Megatrend number two is changing technologies. We've discussed it several times, and this is already in your face. This is something which is quickly shaping and reshaping the dynamics of logistics supply chain. Everyone's talking about AI, but it's not just AI. It's also remotely operated vehicles. It's drones. Pretty soon, people will start delivering things by using drones. So God help the riders, the Uber drivers, the Ninja Go, Food Panda guys, because what they have done to disrupt traditional delivery method, they could themselves be disrupted in a couple of years' time. And then with the advanced like machine learning, big data analytics, Internet of Things, so all these components of Industry 4.0 are fast changing the way logistics are carried out. Megatrend number three is growing adherence to ESG, environment, sustainability, and also governance. This is no longer a question of alternative, not a question of choice, but it is already imposed. You have to comply, because if you don't comply, you're going to get penalized and you're going to lose business. It'll be damaging to your reputation. So it is no longer a flavor of the month thing. So companies around the world, big and small, are embracing ESG as concept, and that has had a very profound impact on the way goods are delivered, in the way that fuel are used now in the marine industry. There's transition towards a cleaner fuel, from bunker fuel to ammonia to hydrogen, LNG, methanol, and so on. So that requires a recalibration of the infrastructure and supporting services. And not to mention that the ships also have got to adopt to green technologies and have green onboard equipment. Megatrend 4 is a growing demand for skilled human capital. This is something which is, of course, the major thing at the moment. I cannot name a single industry which does not face the challenge of having and nurturing human capital in line with growing technologies and a growing complication and sophistication of machines, equipment, processes, growing regulatory requirements. So all these require a multi-skill, interdisciplinary human capital that are tech savvy, but also acquire in possession with many soft skills such as decision making, working well in a cross cultural setting, and also critical thinking, and also strategic planning, and many other types of things. Number 5 is evolving competitive landscape. Well, this has resulted in new forms of collaboration. It used to be just the old school way of joint ventures, strategic alliances, mergers and acquisition. But now companies are finding themselves to have to collaborate even with their competition. Therefore, giving rise to a new term which I recently heard called co-opetition. You cooperate and collaborate with your competition. So that has given rise to new forms of hybrid organizations that are essential these days to resolve big problems, to allocate resources wisely, and also not to engage in a battle of attrition, of a fight to the death, or rather destructive competition. Competition is good, but you don't want to compete in the style of Pepsi versus Coke to a point where you spend gazillions only to not see much result out of it, especially contributing to your bottom line. Next. Next slide, please. Okay, the next one is, I mentioned a little bit just now about revolving a regulatory landscape. Not a single day goes by without new conventions, new international standards, protocols, rules, regulations being honed, being improved, being introduced. So this is affecting many aspects of life: banking, finance, investment, trade, social aspects, many others, and of course in the logistics sector as well. Because now, for example, reducing emissions, decarbonization in the maritime industry, member nations of International Maritime Organization are duty bound to help reduce the emissions to meet the climate and emission target of IMO, which is to turn international shipping into net zero by 2050 and the earliest by 2030. So the changing regulatory landscape has a very, very influential role in deciding the way things move across supply chains. Number 7, climate change and a growing pressure to companies. I already mentioned that a little bit. I think not a single business now is immune to this. You can no longer plead, innocent or ignorance about what is happening around us. Everyone is duty bound and morally responsible to become better custodian of the environment and also to protect Mother Nature. And that, of course, has a again very profound impact on the way logistics services are provided. Optimizing last mile delivery, we are all, especially in the context of developing countries with very challenging topography and geographical layout, like Malaysia, for example, which is split by an ocean. We have Peninsular Malaysia, and we also have 2 states which are on an island called Borneo. So last mile connectivity sometimes hampers the smooth flow of supply chain, and also obviously has an influential impact on the price of goods and also services, because although ports we do have several world-class ports in our midst, especially Port Klang, which is mentioned earlier, and also Port of Tanjung Pelepas, which are 2 of the world's top 10 and also 14 busiest container ports in terms of throughput handle. But last mile connectivity, last mile delivery from port to warehouses, port to end users and consumers sometimes are found wanting because of the geographical challenges, because of the uneven infrastructure development, trade infrastructure, including roads, railroad, and also the paucity of the availability of freight forwarding services such as hauliers and so on, especially to the rural areas and also to least populous and least developed areas within the country. Number 9 is growing focus on specialized logistics. This include hazardous material, cold chain logistics, halal logistics, pharmaceuticals, integrated circuits, which need a special kind of handling. So these are among the these are very prominent at the moment. It's very visible that we see that many logistics service providers are gravitating towards providing this kind of special handling of special cargoes. Next is last but not least is shifting towards customer-centric, multi-party, omni-channel, decentralized logistics. So again, this is an idea whose time has come. It is actually a reaction to the way that middle class have emerged in many countries, and the demand for consumers, consumer goods, for materials, for cars, for a lot of things and services as well, are now requiring logistics service providers to be a little bit less centralized, and also in order to be more lean and to be more reactive, and also to be more proactive even to meet the needs of the customer. So all these things put together are the mega trends that are very essential in making a supply chains resilient. So to sum it all up, can I go to the next slide? You can look at all those points. Basically, I do not wish to belabor each of the points because they're all equally important to me. So all the things which I mentioned are the mega trends need to be addressed in order for us to make the supply chain resilient. So we can handle at least 10 of those. Obviously, there are a lot more mega trends happening, but they are called mega for a reason. They are, to me, at least from my point of view, are the biggest trends which are affecting our logistics supply chain at the moment. And if we can address all these mega trends, we can conquer them. We can befriend them. We are not ignorant of them, and we try to best our possibility to control the dynamics of each of the mega trend. Then we will be in good hands. We are quite sure to be able to deliver a robust, resilient, versatile, transparent, and also cost competitive supply chain. So that brings me to the last session, and I hope I've not taken too much of your time. In the 10 minutes have been allocated.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
I
Khalid.
have one more slide, sir. Captain, I have one more slide. I just want to.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And okay. One more slide. The slide after this, please. Okay, so I just it all out by saying, if we don't, there are three types of people in this world, as I say, as one funny comedian once says, those who watch things happen, those who make things happen, and those who ask, what the hell happened? So we certainly don't want to be in the third category, right? So with all these things happening, we are duty bound as practitioners, as scholars, as people who are in positions of influence to shape the logistics and supply chain industry. And also from the point of view of being a citizen of ASEAN or Malaysia, which have very close ties with India, we certainly would like to see trade flow not being impeded, and growth, trade between us, economic ties, bilateral ties growing and strengthening from time to time. So key to making that happen is to make sure that the supply chains which are serving both our markets are resilient, are robust, and also versatile and flexible in order to be able to absorb the kind of shocks which we are facing at the moment, which seem to be relentless one after another, from the time the Ukraine COVID, and then Ukraine war, and then tariff wars, and now the conflict in the Gulf, and God knows what else is coming our way. So with that, I thank you very much for your indulgence, and I look forward to engaging further with you on this very important topic. So long live the friendship between India and ASEAN. Shukriya, dhanyavad.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Khalid. Thank you very much. And you have given us plenty of food for thought in a very short time. And I'm sure we will deeply reflecting on every of your mega trends and the issue which it implies.
Thank you. I heard someone burping, so maybe I fed them too much food.
So, okay, thank you very much for
Very
your
welcome.
contribution. And I move to my next speaker, Dr. Ray. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to RIS for the invitation. So I'll just begin with two announcements that happened yesterday. Of all the things that are happening, so many things happening every day. The first is that the Brent crude price has touched $120 a barrel. And that means in the energy markets, there is a lot of disruption that is going to come in the in the days to come. The second is, of course, UAE leaving the OPEC. The two events, of course, related to the war that is going on in Iran, but have major implications for supply chains and resilience of supply chains. And partly the problem has not started this year. Partly the problem has started last year when the liberation rate tariffs were announced by President Trump, and a baseline tariff of about 10% was imposed on all countries. And then there were differential tariffs that were imposed on many countries. India at one time faced 25% plus 25% tariffs, one of the highest in the world. And then all of this has actually led to a lot of rise in uncertainty. And that has been sort of the problem that has impacted supply chains majorly and has great implications for their resilience. In the context of India and ASEAN, the most important things are basically, just a minute. Yeah. So some of the risks that both these countries have faced, ASEAN as a region and India as a country, of course, is energy dependence, because some of the countries of ASEAN are importers like India. India imports about 85% of its oil, as well as 50% of its gas. So there is a huge kind of impact of that. But the other kinds of problems that have come up is basically supply concentration. So dependence on single suppliers for some goods, not only things like energy, but things also like critical minerals, on which so much manufacturing things, electronics, etc., is, or EVs, etc., are dependent on. The other kind of problem that has that we are facing currently is, of course, policy unpredictability. Given all that is happening in this world now, sudden tariffs, export bans, sanctions, and so many other things, the level of uncertainty, the level of policy uncertainty also has increased manifold. On top of all of this is, particularly India also is facing another kind of problem, which is financial. Basically, the rupee is under pressure. And that has ramifications, of course, for in terms of how well we'll grow, how much we can export, and other things that we can do. Now, in the context of building resilient supply chains, a lot of it has already been spoken by my previous speakers. So, things like energy diversification, redesign of supply chains, regionalism, logistics infrastructure, and digitalization, etc. I will talk about two of these, energy diversification and financial and policy coordination. In terms of energy diversification, given that a lot of manufacturing still is actually dependent on using of either energy like oil or natural gas, and in the context of India also coal for that matter. And it is in fact very now critical that we actually try to diversify, at least from single suppliers or to other countries. We have tried that in the last year, with some success sometimes and with not so much success at other times. For example, in the case of natural gas, 50% of our natural gas comes from one country, Qatar. And given that their the gas field has been impacted by in the current situation, and it is expected that it might become operational only after 3 or 4 years, which means that there will be a huge impact on the natural gas market. That is also true for some of the ASEAN countries. Not all are energy importers. Some of them are. So there will be similar kind of impacts on all of them. And the other kinds of problem thing that I will be talking about is financial and policy coordination. Now, the thing is that given that in the context of the BRICS, in fact, what has been, people have been discussing that can trade be done in local currency, in terms of payments in terms of local currency. And this is an idea that has been there for some time. But is this an idea that even the ASEAN countries and India can explore together? We don't know that. But of course, the other kind of thing is that basically if we move away from the current system of SWIFT, payments via SWIFT, what is the alternative payment system that the world will adopt? And given that the system, it takes time to evolve, there could be a lot of major disruptions, in fact, till the system regulates and reaches a point where it is the default system. So what we are going to see in the near future is, of course, a lot of disruptions that on account of all of this. But the one other thing that we can actually think about, especially India and ASEAN in the context of supply chains, is policy coordination, and things like, standards, etc., then become very important. There has been talks about harmonization in the past. Both ASEAN as a region and India have talked about these things, but we haven't moved much beyond talking on some of these things. But given that now the situation is in some sense very dire, maybe the time is ripe for further discussions on not only things like standards, but also other kinds of issues on policy coordination. So I think I will stop here and maybe take up if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And I'm sure that what you said, ability of the countries to think through collectively to any kind of solution to the problem they face is a possibility. It's just that the people needs to agree to that. India, ASEAN, you rightly said that while we have convergences and we keep talking about some solutions, some of them has been far from being been rather short of implementation, and probably we are facing certain common challenges. We could think of implementation, expediting the implementation. Dr. Palit had said about having look at some of the issues under discussion in IPEF. Probably those are the right direction. But with these few words, let me open to the questions which the audience may have. Yeah, okay. Just a minute, let me let the organizers give you a mic because they needs to have a record of conversation.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Somnath Paningre. So my question is for Palit, sir. Like, as you clearly mentioned about the cargo shipment, the challenges, and what are their how we can tackle them. So, like, recently in the war of Iran, like in the Strait of Hormuz, many countries' ships are getting destroyed by air drones and like direct attacks. So people are shifting from, like, the countries are shifting from large amount of ship cargoes to small amount so that they cannot be easily targeted. Like in other hand, in India, it doesn't affect like our ships. So if any case in the near future, if they may occur in our countries, like how will India react? So in other hand, like in the South China Sea, China is like growing their presence in naval in the South China Sea, and also in the ICJ record they clearly mentioned that what China is doing is illegal in the South China Sea. Like if India is trying to get their hands in other countries in South China Sea, it will be very difficult for them to interact.
Like we refer to multimodal transport. This is almost. Look, I think I take the spirit of your question and let me answer it in a somewhat more generalistic term. I think, there's this growing concern about security of passage. I think that's an issue that I alluded to once in my thoughts. And the security of passage is something which for a number of years, especially during the period of economic globalization, countries didn't have to bother too much about. And it was also largely because of the fact that there was a rules-based order which was being, primarily safeguarded by the United States. And there was not enough visible competition to that extent. There were not sporadic threats. This has changed significantly over the last 3 to 4, 5 years. And what we are getting to see now is that it's not just a question of, how secure the goods are between point A and point B, but it's also the nature of risk and the threat that is unpredictable. Now, I just want to shift direction to one more point and bring in the question of supply chain resilience and look at what have been the main forces of disruption, what have been the main factors disturbing supply chains pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, Pre-COVID, the surveys that were carried out across enterprises actually showed that the biggest amount of disruptions to supply chains are coming out of IT outages, accompanied with cybersecurity threats. Maritime disruptions were nowhere, a part of the story. There were even natural disasters. For example, the Fukushima earthquake was one point, floods in Thailand happened, many others. On top of all this, today there is a different kind of issue that's coming up with respect to security of passage of cargo on waters. This is something which was one of the driving factors behind the proposition of an idea like the IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Connectivity Corridor, which was multimodal and which had collective guarantee of passage. It still has. Now, if we visit this issue from the point of view of the insurers or the shipping industry, I am not exactly sure whether dividing cargo into small blocks will actually be something which will be what the insurers are looking for. I think the insurers are simply worried about the burden of liability that comes to them, and this is a risk which they're unable to fathom. There is no actuarization in so far as modeling is concerned, which is giving them an idea about the volume of liability to which they can provide a cover and get effective reinsurance. So I'm not really sure whether a breakdown of cargo is going to help in any way, but I think what is necessary is actually state guarantee to some extent, or a guarantee between certain states to some extent, to provide insurance of passage. So we had, in the beginning of the Iran war, a statement from President Trump, who actually talking about marine risk insurance, the US guarantee. We've also had India making some moves in that respect, with respect to shippers. Now, to what extent this will be backed by counter guarantees, we will have to wait and see. Thank you.
You want to? Okay. Any question? Yes, okay.
Good afternoon to every panelist. My question is related to the domestic factor as a challenge to the supply chain resilience. More specific in context of Myanmar, which is the most pivot strategic partner to India, and the domestic instability in Myanmar also affect the multiple India's infrastructure development and maritime connectivity to Southeast Asia, or in larger extent to Indo-Pacific region. So my question is related to the internal political development, how these development can be managed, or how India can approach these internal political instabilities while securing his maritime security interest. Thank you.
Now, that's a very interesting question. Fundamentally, what you are referring to, internal turmoil in a particular country, is external to India's supply chain. So it's a external geopolitical risk which India or the regional trade flow could affect because of domestic turbulence in a particular country. Now, countries by themselves are sovereigns. They have their own control. External ability to interfere in somebody else's internal affair is governed by many factors. Like ASEAN as an institutions as such, while it prescribes various kind of rules and norms of behavior of its own member, but they have a cardinal rule of not interfering in internal affairs of a particular country. Now, as an external investor in any country, first assessment is about the geopolitical stability in the place where I am making an investment. And if there are risks, those risks are understood and underwritten in the investment which I am making. So Myanmar turbulence was not something which was unforeseen in a major, and even our own approach to building connectivity through Myanmar has some amount of factor taken into consideration. Our problem got amplified when there domestic turbulence in two of our domestic neighborhood, Myanmar one and followed by Bangladesh, and that has its own impact on the connectivity. So the issues are one, that you cannot do anything about the domestic disturbances in any other country. And that's precisely is war in US war Iran is all about. United States dissatisfaction with Iran's ability or the kind of domestic turbulence. At least that's the expression being given. But you do not have to. You understand and anticipate the risk, and that's what the first speaker was talking about, that on a vulnerability you try to develop viability, measures of viability. I hope that's the answer. Your okay, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of question is to all the panelists. So for last 6-7 years, there has been a lot of talk about supply chain resilience and everything, and there has been certain initiatives. So, if I can remember, India, Japan, and Australia signed the supply chain resilience initiative. After that, US has kind of also announced mineral partnership where India is one of the party. Now PEC Silica. So several of these initiatives are being launched, and some have been there for last 6-7 years. So my question or query to all the panelists, I would like to know your views whether these initiatives are actually bearing some fruit in terms of ensuring supply chain resilience or not. If not, then what we should do to make these initiatives more fruitful? Because these initiatives have been there, because India, Australia and Japan trilateral things is in place for last, I think, 6-7 years, but I have not heard. But now this PEC Silica, mineral partnership, and everybody is talking about critical mineral, and there are initiatives. So I was a bit curious to know first whether they have bear some fruit or not. If not, then how and what we can do to make these international initiatives more successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vasist, and I will do one thing. I will give 1 minute each to each of our panelists to respond to, and let me begin by inviting our first speaker, Dr. Kaur.
Right. So, thank you, Commodore. I just want to say that when it comes to risk and resilience, we should able to capture the risk, like when it is. We should be able to anticipate, prepare for all alternatives, know about our complete mapping of supply chain, domain knowledge, and then be prepared for that even before the risk has happened. So that capability has to be developed. Now, such kind of initiatives, even if they have not turned to fruition, I would say that they are very important to be there. Just like, we sign MOU with somebody, later on, if some exigency comes, like, it becomes easier that, we have already set the stage with this initiative. All of a sudden, if we have to come up with some new initiatives, like, at least there is a groundwork already done, and it becomes easier, to follow up with the new trade things in this country. To my knowledge, I don't think so far, this has come to fruition. But, I would say that still, like, the groundwork has already been done. In case, if required, this can be capitalized in future uncertainties. That's my take on that.
Okay, Dr. Palin.
Okay, obviously that the question of a gentleman relates to what I said earlier, and I concur with what was said earlier. But overall, making supply chain is more than just a matter of connecting the dots. Also, as what was mentioned, as an element of predictive analysis, anticipation, management of risk. It requires more than just moving goods in a just-in-time way and it is elevated to just in case strategy. So plan B is not good enough. You gotta have your plan C, plan D, or whatever. So this includes diversifying your supplier base, nearshoring is what I mentioned, increasing inventory buffers, especially for critical components like foodstuff, pharmaceutical, integrated circuits, energy, and also investing in end-to-end digital visibility. And I cannot emphasize enough that there has to be a facilitative policy framework to enable supply chains to become resilient. It cannot be left to the devices of the players alone. There has to be a framework which is pro-business, pro-trade, that will able to help map out at least the vulnerabilities, the pain points, implementing AI-driven forecasting, building redundant logistics networks, and also fostering collaboration among suppliers to ensure there is rapidity, agility in terms of responding to disruptions. Sorry, that sounds more like 1 minute, but.
I think, Pankaj, very specifically to address your point, there is a problem in pushing these initiatives off ground, because the governments have been very proactive, governments have been very well-meaning, but supply chain resilience is not really an industrial policy. A block over here is that the degree which resilience is achieved depends a lot upon intelligence and information shared down the supply chain, and that intelligence sharing is a function of trust, because there are advanced warning systems which have been established. But to what extent those advanced warning systems will be effective depends actually upon the trust between different levels of the operators in the supply chain and the willingness to share those. I think those are especially sensitive in sectors that are strategic by character, semiconductors and so on and so forth. But regionally, I feel, I mean, at least in ASEAN, I think there are certain examples of supply chain resilience having achieved certain performance benchmarks, especially for perishables. Food, I would say, one of the examples.
In my view, these things really depend on the political will. And there has been, political will also has been wavering. At times, the countries are very interested, and then the situation changes, and the kind of pressure that was building up, that diffuses in some sense. So we've had, I think, a mixed, I wouldn't say we had been very successful in that sense. Especially if you look at, say, the critical mineral partnership. It was going very well. And then suddenly you hear, as you said also, that nothing right now. From last year, since President Trump has taken over the US presidency, I think a lot of these things have sort of become, secondary, because everybody is now trying to get their house in order to fight the tariffs primarily, and everything else has become secondary.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all distinguished panelists for such insightful discussion. So my question will be, sir, with Dr. Palis, sir, in terms of the IPEF, supply chain pillars, when we are talking about, and it is what is the existing framework where we have seen certain meeting has also taken place to Supply Chain Council. So my question is that how this sort of framework can be helpful for India to basically create a framework, what you have talked about, just a regional integration of rules relating to maritime, or what you have cited the one example of the ASEAN digital framework. So how these kind of framework can be helpful to further, I can say that, take advantage or leverage to harmonize these rules in relation to make more resilient supply chain, what we are talking about here. Thank you, sir.
It helps in two ways. The first is that these frameworks, and on the basis of the announcements they make, the proposals they bring in, the agreements that they draft, they put in place a framework which is not really binding in character, more voluntary and participatory, but nonetheless puts in place a template for enterprises and businesses to pick up and move forward. And the enterprises and businesses are confident in taking that template because those have been brought in by 15 member country governments. And they have that much of confidence in collaborating and participating in those frameworks. But eventually, moving forward from there, I don't really think that, having this kind of framework automatically generates the ability to participate in other rules-based frameworks. Yes, it does help to some extent in trade facilitation. It helps in logistic facilitation creating. But when we're looking at digital standards become to a very large extent dependent upon domestic standards and the extent by which those domestic rules have shaped or not shaped. And there are very large regulatory gaps. So even within IPEF, I think IPEF was a novel experiment and continues to remain a functional framework, but it needed a leadership. And that leadership, to a very large extent, was being provided by the United States. It also had a strategic driver, the China Plus One objective. Now, both these factors now have diluted and ebbed. So to a very large extent, it's become a voluntary framework. Voluntary frameworks vary depending upon the speed that they pick up, and not all members participate equally.
This question is for Dr. Khalid and Dr. Palith. Dr. Khalid, I quite liked your 10 mega trends and your 5 suggestions. But my question is, when you look at the mega trends and the suggestions, India is going to engage the ASEAN as one entity. So, given your mega trends, Dr. Khalid, and the 5 suggestions, Dr. Palith, what is the intra-ASEAN stand on these, or the status on these mega trends and suggestions? And is it right now the right stage to engage India ASEAN on the suggested mega trends and the 5 suggestions, or do you think there is a timeline in which we can develop it?
Thank you, sir, for your question. As you know, ASEAN is not bound by a charter, and certainly not like EU, which has its own jurisdiction and so on. So ASEAN works on the principle of non-interference, non-alignment, preserving regional harmony, and most importantly, it is a loose association. So members are not duty-bound to implement any of the visions, including major ones like ASEAN Free Trade Agreement, ASEAN Connectivity, which aims to integrate the Southeast Asian economies into and promoting it as one single united investment region. But at the same time, we are also in competition with one another, and the competition can be very intense. So while we at the ASEAN level, speak about unity, come up with a united front, we are also there's also intra-ASEAN competition with one another. So that makes it a little bit difficult to come up with a cohesive single voice when it comes to promoting logistics. But ASEAN, at the very least, has acknowledged the importance of logistics as one of the pillars of realizing the objective of ASEAN connectivity, which is anchored on 5 principles, namely integrating, number 1, through sustainable infrastructure, number 2, digital innovation, number 3, seamless logistics, which is what we are discussing today, number 4, regulatory excellence, including harmonization of trade rules and so on, and number 5, mobility of people within the region. So at the very least, there's an acknowledgement of the importance of logistics as a fundamental driver of regional growth. But one has to understand that ASEAN is a very diverse region with various levels of development. On one hand, you have Singapore, which is considered an advanced economy, and then you have the likes of Malaysia, Thailand, which are fast approaching towards fully developed status, and then you have your Myanmar, your Laos, Cambodia, and using terminology which I hope does not offend anyone, as being least developed countries among those. And then we have a newest member, which is Timor-Leste, which obviously from an economic standpoint and infrastructure, logistics standpoint, is decidedly way behind the other ASEAN member nations. So again, it takes a lot more to just then have infrastructure, but we also have to have a cohesive approach towards making it happen, and a prosper Thai neighbor. This may sound very old school, but I think if we can all agree that if one of our members prosper, then it can also help intra-ASEAN trade flourish, and therefore help each other with capacity building, infrastructure development, FDI, and help each other, lift each other up to make ASEAN a center of excellence and a logistics hub.
Very quickly, Captain Parmar, I think I agree with Dr. Khalid's observation. ASEAN is characteristically heterogeneous. And while from an Indian point of view, we might tend to look at ASEAN as a homogeneous whole, I think it's important to note the differences within the bloc, especially in regulatory capacities and institutional growth. And to that extent, if these suggestions, the one that I mentioned, are to be taken forward, I would think that at this stage, not all members of ASEAN are in a state of institutional and regulatory maturity to actually combine on those, and perhaps there would have to be a selective approach.
Just to add to that, obviously among the ASEAN members, there are various levels of weightage given the logistics. A country like Myanmar, for example, and more importantly, is just to feed the people, and also to ensure that there's no strife, and also many other strategic issues which they have to worry about. Whereas a country like Malaysia, thank God, we are already beyond that, and we are looking into integrating ourselves into the global economy and global supply chains. So different weightage and different attention given. Singapore certainly lives and dies by its port and airport. So all attention, all policies are gravitating towards making sure that these ports remain world-class, remain numero uno in this region, and also continue to become the port and also airport of choice. So, and of course, countries like Indonesia, where the 17,000 islands face a huge amount of challenges when it comes to infra development, connectivity, and so on. So that's something which I think we all do well to appreciate.
Okay, so thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It has been wonderful engaging with you, and please allow me to join to applaud our panelists for their wonderful contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Before we close, we have a small token of appreciation for our chair and our speakers. So may I request my colleague, Captain Parmar, to come on the dais and do the honor, please.
Do online speakers get a gift too?
Yeah, we will send it to you by post, sir.
I was just kidding.
Okay, so
Thank you very much. Thank you.
for a post-lunch session, it was quite exciting given the number of questions. So, if you don't mind, exclusive last.
So I would also request you to please be seated for a couple of more minutes. I would request my colleague Captain Parmar to propose a vote of thanks, and then we can.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long day, But I think given the number of questions asked in the post-lunch session, I haven't seen such an active session before. So at the outset, I'd like to thank the ambassadors and the diplomatic corps community who attended. And of course, thank you for the online participation. Dr. Shinder Kaur, we missed your presence. Dr. Khalid, we will get you in some point in time, so hang on, and we will give you 2 mementos at that stage. Right. And of course, to the panelists on the floor and the chairs, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. We have a lot of food for thought, and it's going to be one of the toughest reports to make. And thank you so much. And of course, the RIS and AIC staff who always work behind the lines, and the Habitat Center for their gracious use of this room. Thank you so much, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.